Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for another virtual author event. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book here from my home, and I'm so happy to be joined by Katherine St. John and Janelle Brown.
Hello, hello.
Hi. So Katherine St. John is a native of Mississippi and graduate of the University of Southern California. Over the years, she's worked as an actress, screenwriter, director, photographer, producer, singer-songwriter, legal assistant, bartender, waitress, yoga instructor, real estate agent, and travel coordinator. But finds she likes writing novels best, lucky for us. Katherine currently lives in Los Angeles with her husband and children. She's here today to talk about The Lion's Den. Janelle Brown is the New York Times bestselling author of Watch Me Disappear, All We Ever Wanted Was Everything, and This Is Where We Live. An essayist and journalist, she's written for Vogue, the New York Times, Elle, Wired, Self, the Los Angeles Times, Salon, and numerous other publications. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and their 2 children. Her latest book is Pretty Things. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'm so happy to be chatting with you both. I have read and loved both books. I actually work as a consultant for a publisher who did not get Lion's Den, but I read it on acquisition, and so years ago now, and absolutely adored it. And then I wish I had read Pretty Things sooner because I've just finished it recently, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So I'm so glad to talk to you both. So the world is pretty crazy right now. How are you?
The world is pretty crazy, isn't it? It's a dumpster fire.
It is, yeah.
We're both in Los Angeles, which is like certainly it seems like the epicenter of all things crazy right now. So
it is. It's funny too, because like when I walk around my neighborhood, everybody's wearing masks, everybody's very good at social distancing, and so it doesn't seem very real. And then you'll drive by a park and you'll see like 60 people playing basketball without masks on or anything. It's like, oh, that's why it's a surging.
I mean, we're in Houston, so I completely sympathize. We're in our little urban bubble of a lot of people wearing masks, and you go 5 miles away from the center and there's a lot of people not. So yeah, we're at the epicenter as well. It's not great by any means.
Mask up, everyone.
Yeah, mask up.
So before I get into the questions, I would like to mention that we do have signed book plates for Katherine St. John's book, and maybe we can twist Janelle's arm at some point to getting us some of those. But we have those if you'd like to order copies of the book. Obviously, you can find them on our website at murderbooks.com. If you have any questions, you can't see him, but John, our event coordinator, is lurking in the background, and he will be feeding me questions from the comments during this event. So I'll be able to work those in and get to them later on. So make sure if you're watching, just pop a question in the comments, we'll get to it. But for now, let's start with, tell me an elevator pitch for your book. And why don't, just to be convenient, why don't we start with Katherine and then go to Janelle?
Okay. My book is about a gold digger who takes her best friends on a trip to the Mediterranean aboard her sugar daddy's yacht, and they don't all make it back.
Excellent.
It's about as short as I can get it.
Yeah.
And Pretty Things is about 2 women, one a con artist and the other an heiress, whose lives become entangled over the course of a winter as the con artist tries to con the heiress.
Excellent. Boy, you both did great on that. A lot of people can't do that.
Well, we live in Los Angeles.
That's right. You know how to pitch things. All right. I've been saying that Lion's Den, and I hope this is complimentary to you, is Jackie Collins meets Hitchcock. And while I don't have quite the catchphrase for Pretty Things, I will say that from the beginning of the book, I was absolutely hooked. The suspense in both is paced beautifully, and deception is a driving force. Would you like to talk about how you plan out suspense in your books to keep readers turning the pages?
I want to hear Janelle talk about this first. Okay. You know, it's funny, like I had someone ask me recently, like, do you, when you're plotting your books, do you use the hero's journey, and what is the methodology that you use? And I was like, you know what, I just kind of make stuff up. I mean, I do, for me, plotting is often, it starts very loose and then it gets tight. So I start with a very loose idea of what things I want to happen at different points in the book. You know, general movements of action. And I'll usually have some of the twists in my head that I kind of know, the big twist that I walk in knowing they're going to happen. But then I don't have elaborate outlines. I don't have everything figured out. I start writing character. And as I start writing the characters and they start coming to life, the story starts to evolve, because I find that what happens is characters dictate story instead of story dictating character, right? So as I write the characters, things start to change, and then the story plot starts to dictate itself to me, if that makes sense. And often what happens is I get through partway through the book and I'll realize that there's a new storyline emerging that I hadn't actually imagined in the first place. And then I have to kind of go back and start reworking the book to meet where it's gone, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So basically I know there's the kind of pantsers versus the plotters, and I am more of a pantser, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I do always have a general arc of where I want it to go.
All right, Katherine.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because I hear so much of what I do as well. And it's always great when you feel validated, when you hear somebody else that kind of works the same way that you do. You're just like, oh, I'm not crazy. But I definitely, with the Lion's Den, I did not at all first start plotting. I had an idea of the story, an idea of the characters. It came to me. That meant I did a lot of rewriting, especially with all of the flashbacks and making sure that they dovetailed through the narrative, especially when you're doing flashbacks with the past. You really have to make sure that the arcs of the characters are consistent with the present. So you can't have, if you have a character that is very, very selfish and her arc is that she's going to become less selfish, you can't have flashbacks, as she's becoming less selfish, you can't be flashing back to her being really selfish. It feels like this. So creating those arcs and making sure that they dovetail, especially when you're flashing back, does require some planning. But like you, Janelle, a lot of times I'll get into it. First, I'll have a pretty big idea of like, okay, this is where I'm going to start. This is where I'm going to end. And maybe a couple points along the way that I want to hit to get there. But once I actually get into it and start writing these characters, like you were saying, they start talking to you and they tell you what they want to do. And sometimes it's different than what you wanted them to do initially. And sometimes it's way better, and then I'll go back and I'll plot meticulously. So it's kind of a combination of both, but you have to give the characters room to talk to you. And for me, in order to get to that plot stuff.
Great. So I have a question later on that is essentially, do your characters ever take the wheel away from you? Did that happen to you in this book?
Yes, they do sometimes. I had characters that I had, written thinking they were going to be minor characters, and then they became much more major characters. They just started speaking to me more, and I was like, oh, fine, you have more room. I did always know this book was going to be a two-hander, that it was going to be Nina and Vanessa to alternating points of view. But I didn't realize how some of the secondary characters were going to grow in the book, and they became much more prevalent. My last book, Watch Me Disappear, that completely changed after a character started going in a direction I hadn't anticipated when I started writing it. The character of Billy, the mom in that book. And yeah, that book, I had to throw away the entire, so many hundreds of pages in that book. When the character hijacked it and went in a new direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives it spontaneity, though. And I think that's what, especially when you're writing a thriller, you want your readers to keep guessing. And if you don't allow the characters to dictate where the plot is going sometimes, then it can become too predictable. I think that we've all had the experience of reading something or watching a movie where it's like from the very beginning, you're like, okay, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. And that's no fun. It's a lot more fun when you can be surprised as a reader throughout the course of the novel, hopefully a couple of times.
Yeah, absolutely. So are your main characters you in any way?
All of my characters are me. Every character I've ever written, but that much me, in the sense that I have to be able to relate to a character in order to write them realistically. So there's always some aspect of every character that I've ever written as a protagonist in my books that comes from something that I feel inside myself, right? Whether, and it's, you know, I'm not saying that I'm a grifter or I'm an heiress or I am a narcissist or whatever some of these characters are, but I can relate to some aspect of their personality that I feel inside myself. And it might just be insecurity. It might just be feelings of, you know, frustration with your mother, whatever, something that I can relate to. So I put a little bit of myself in all my characters, but that said, none of them are me. So
I think that it's like that hook. It's like that way into a character to understand who they are. And if you can identify with them in some way. I used to be an actress, and that was a trick that I would always use, was to find something that I could identify with in that character that was close to me. With Belle in The Lion's Den, she's probably the character that I've written that is the closest to me, because this is my first book. And I think that, you know, with your first book, you probably write the closest to you, because that old adage, you know, write what you know. So I think that Belle's probably the closest to me. As I'm now working on my third book, and the characters, it's like I got that out. She's not me, but there's a lot of my experiences as an actress working in Hollywood in my 20s are in there. There's a lot more of young me in her than there is in subsequent characters. It's like I'm now free to explore other people because I did that. Yeah.
So we have a book set on a yacht in the Mediterranean, and then one mostly in Stonehaven, a mansion in Lake Tahoe, also with a yacht. What drew you to these settings, and which came first, your plot or your idea for the book, or the setting?
So I grew up, I don't know if you know much about Lake Tahoe, but it's about 4.5 hours from San Francisco, which is where I grew up. And my family had a vacation home up there, and I spent a lot of time up there. And it's been this place I always wanted to set a book. I've always been like, I'm going to find the story that fits Tahoe. And when I find the Tahoe book, I will write it. And so I came up with the idea of, you know, this con artist. I knew she needed to I wanted her to move into the guest house of a beautiful mansion in some kind of slightly remote feeling place in the middle of winter time. And I was like, ding, 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 this is my Tahoe book. So yeah, you know, the location had been for a book had been sitting in my head for quite some time, but this was finally the book that spoke to the setting. And then I had a blast writing it there. So, and coming up with a mansion, the giant mansion, which was inspired by some of the estates that are up in Lake Tahoe, but I took them and made them much grander for Stonehaven. So.
Speaking of grand, Mediterranean yacht.
Yeah. I've been to the Mediterranean. I've seen the yachts. And I remember being in the Mediterranean and thinking, you know, seeing like in Saint-Tropez when you walk along and you see all of the yachts just like parked, like, you know, cars, and everyone bigger than the next, and seeing the lifestyle of the people who are that very, very wealthy, 0.001%. And I've always been very, very interested in how money affects people. And I thought, what better place to set a novel than, you know, in that world and in this very specific place where that is the playground of the rich and famous. And then also setting it on a yacht, you immediately, it's an island. It's this very small world surrounded by water. And, you know, once you're on that yacht, you can't just get off, you know, and the Wi-Fi there's no Wi-Fi, and your cell phone may not work, and you're kind of trapped with these people. So I thought that would be, you know, for a novel about money and the things that it does to people, I thought that would be the right place to set it.
And speaking of money and what it does to people, both of your books take a look at the uber wealthy through the eyes of someone who is not. What drew you to that world, and what kind of research did you do? Any especially juicy or crazy things that you read or learned about?
Well, I mean, juicy, or I don't know if I have anything juicy. I'm like, I'd have to stop to think about it. I mean, I did so the character of Vanessa is a kind of West Coast royalty in the sense that she's one of these old San Francisco clans that made all their money during the gold rush and have kind of built a dynasty up from it. But her family's money is also kind of on the wane, and she herself has become an Instagram influencer. So, and so I spent a lot of time digging into the world of influencers and following these Instagram influencers who are just, you know, jet setting around the world and going to, you know, the Paris couture shows, and then, you know, yachts in the Mediterranean, and then off in Bahrain, like riding a camel, wearing couture. I mean, it's a crazy. So that was kind of fascinating for me. I went down a deep rabbit hole for a long time and just kind of hate following these people. Like, how disconnected are you from real life? And then, you know, I did do a lot of research into the San Francisco, kind of wealthy San Francisco families, which are, it's not quite the level of billionaire wealth that you're writing about in your book, Katherine, but this kind of old money, West Coast, you know, less gauche and more kind of, you know, sense of tradition and class, whatever that might be. But I had stories. I don't have any stories. So,
how about you?
I definitely drew on experiences that I had with super rich people. You know, living in Los Angeles and working all the many different jobs that I worked that you listed at the beginning of this. You know, I had the opportunity to come in contact with a lot of very, very wealthy people, either as their waitress or, you know, as their friend, or, you know, I had friends who would be a bartender one day and on a television show the next day, that kind of thing. So you see this, and you see the juxtaposition of people without money and people with money, and often those same people being friends, which I found very, very interesting, and the way that can be woven into a friendship, and the different levels of power because of money, I found very, very interesting. Where I had to do the most research, you know, was with the business end of it. You know, the billionaire in question who owns the yacht is doing some business that may or may not be shady. And so I had to kind of figure out, like, what exactly would that be? Because in my mind, before I started looking into it and studying what it is that these billionaires do, I was just kind of like, oh, you know, business stuff. They do business stuff, you know, but I had to think, like, well, what is that? And what, you know, where do these people get their money, and what are the things that they do that are bad? And there's one bad thing, I don't want to give anything away, but the super bad thing that you find out that he did in the past is akin to something that happened in a different country that I kind of like read about and and I was like, wow, this actually happened. So I definitely pulled from different places. And then also, you know, when you're writing a place, even if you've been to that place, and I don't know if you did this with like Tahoe as well, but like I Google Maps a lot, and I'll be just, you know, going down the street with my arrow, you know, making sure that it feels right.
I do the same thing. I didn't do that at Tahoe because I actually went up to Tahoe and spent time there, and I drove around. I know the area really well, but I've done that I was actually doing that today for my new book. You know, you set it in a place and you realize you know, much as you think you know a place, if it's not right there where you can go visit it, you sometimes need like to drop a pin and just explore it and visually.
Right.
Yeah, I was doing
other things about that place that you didn't know before. Like there's a scene in a graveyard in Saint-Tropez, this incredible graveyard that I discovered on Google Maps. I'd never seen it when I was in Saint-Tropez, but I was like, once I discovered it, I was like, wow, this is a really incredible place. I need to use this.
Yeah, I for my last book, there's a cottage in Santa Cruz. And I hadn't actually been to Santa Cruz in years. And if I was living in Los Angeles, I didn't have time to drive up to Santa Cruz and write it. So I literally like just used the map and put the arrow down the street, step by step, like randomly dropping pins until I found a house that looked like what I was imagining in this cottage being. Then I bookmarked it. And every time and then I would kind of like go back to this house and I'd cruise around so I could describe the street and the rest of, you know. that person probably has no idea that their house is in my book.
Or they will pick up the book and they'll be like, this is my house. And then they'll see you.
Yeah.
So
with yacht floor plans, because it was important for me to know where they were in the yacht, and like yachts can be kind of confusing. So I went through pictures of yachts on websites, and then I found the yacht floor plan that would work for me, and I had it up anytime that I was writing, so I knew exactly where they were and what staircase they needed to take to get around to the other side and all that kind of stuff.
I just did the same thing because, you know, there's a yacht of mine. My yacht is much more modest than yours because you can't have giant yachts like that. And like Tahoe, the yachts up there are a little bit more modest is the way to put it. But yeah, I was like going through pictures of yachts and trying to find one that would fit the scale of what Tahoe yacht is, and then looking at the floor plans and figuring out where where the galley would be, and yeah. That's one of
the most fun things about writing, I think, is getting into all those details.
Yeah, you know? Research can be really fun. It can be, you can just spend hours and hours, days, really, if you wanted to, just like a little.
I've been considering, especially because of COVID right now, like my third book that I'm working on right now is set in the jungle. And I had this big trip planned to the jungle with my husband. We were going to leave the children with my parents. It was going to be incredible. And of course, now we couldn't go to the jungle. We totally missed that. And I have been to the jungle, but it's been a long time since I've been to the jungle. So I have been doing a lot of, Google Mapsing, and I've been in the jungle, looking at pictures, listening to, night sounds of the jungle while I'm writing. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just get some VR? I was like, that's a really good idea. So I think I might get VR so that it's at least a little bit more of an immersive experience than just Google Maps.
Great idea.
So if you're joining us right now, a lot of people come into these a few minutes late, and you've missed something. You can view the whole video a couple ways. After this is done, you can play it from the beginning on Facebook, or we upload all of our author events onto YouTube on our YouTube channel. So you can see all the ones we've done so far and check this out later this evening. I should have it up maybe tomorrow. We have a comment, not a question, but Patty says, in The Lion's Den, one line that hit her was, money doesn't change people. It only magnifies the qualities that were already there. And we have a follow-up question by Alexandra that says, is being wealthy inherently immoral? What do you guys think about that?
Katherine?
I do not think that being wealthy is inherently immoral. I think that it's exactly like that line from The Lion's Den, that money doesn't magnify. I mean, it doesn't change people. It just magnifies the qualities that were already there. And I think that that's one of the things that's one of the actual theme statements of The Lion's Den. So thank you, Patty. Because it's very true. Not every rich person is bad. I mean, you see these amazing philanthropists doing great things. Sometimes you don't even hear about the great things that they're doing because they're doing them quietly, because they're actually trying to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. And we need those people. And I don't think that money is bad, but I think that having access to it and being able to buy your way into or out of anything is a very difficult thing for a person. It's very difficult not to become a terrible person when no one ever tells you no. You really have to hold on to your sense of self. You think about, we've all heard of those movie stars who behave badly, but especially maybe some that have been stars since they were young. And they never ever had anybody to tell them, hey, no, that's not cool when you do that, or to stop being their friend. Because, so much of the time when people have a lot of money, there's a lot of hangers on. There's a lot of people that want something from them and are willing to be obsequious in order to get it. And you see that with the girls on the yacht in The Lion's Den. Some of them are more obsequious than others.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Whoa, sorry, blinding light there. I don't think it's immoral to have money. I think the morality comes in what you do with the money, and whether you use it to elevate the world that you live in, or you use it to elevate yourself. And I certainly know plenty of wealthy people who are very good people who are doing a lot to, like you said, quietly often, to help other people. And And, you know, if we didn't have anybody with money, then, you know, we would lose out on a lot of the great charities that exist. I mean, that help people. Granted, if there's, you could go down a whole socialism argument here that I'm not prepared to go into. But anyway.
Next book.
Next.
Well, speaking of next book, what does a normal writing day look like for you, either pre-pandemic or now, currently? Are you able to write? Obviously, you said, Katherine, that you're working on your jungle book. So why don't you tell us about what you're working on, and then also maybe take this opportunity to drop some hints about your next book that's coming out.
Sure. A typical work day for me before COVID looked like my kids would leave for school. My husband would take them to school at about 7:45, and I would sit down to write. And then at some point, maybe I would work out. And oftentimes working out means walking around my neighborhood while trying to work out in my head something that I'm writing. And then I go pick up my kids at around like 4:15. And and I would be writing all day. Now, my husband and I have been trading off both working full-time jobs. So I've been getting up a lot earlier. I've been able, he works in television and doesn't have to be like at his desk until 10. And so, well, desk, like in our house. And so I've been having to get up at around 6, and I'll work until 10. And then our kids have a 2-hour, rest time, and then iPad time in the middle of the day. And I use that again to write. Luckily though, my husband's job, the show that he was working on, has just ended. So I am like, woohoo, I get to write all day long. It's wonderful. And my next book is called The Siren, and it'll be out spring, summer of next year in 2021, when hopefully we will not be dealing with COVID anymore, and we'll be able to actually come to bookstores in person. Fingers crossed.
We would love that.
On a Caribbean island, a private Caribbean island owned by a movie star. And the movie star is also producing a movie which is being shot on the island. It's told from 3 different points of view, and, secrets come to light, things that happened in the past. People may not be who they profess themselves to be, and there may even be a murder.
So my pre-COVID routine was almost identical to yours, Katherine. I mean, kids go off to school, I go write, I pick them up around 4, and is not that different from yours now either. I take my writing where I can get it. My husband's home, and we are juggling as best we can. Trying to teach the kids how to be self-sufficient, trying to encourage them not to spend the whole day on iPad.
Yep. Be creative, go write a story.
Yeah, exactly. There's, we're trying to do like, okay, you have to do your exercise time, you have to do your art time, you have to read for an hour, then you can have 3 hours of iPad. And then I can, hopefully fit my writing in there. I am working on a couple different things right now. I have a new book that I'm working on that I don't talk about my works when they're in progress, because I don't like to pin them down until I'm done with the first draft, because I like to leave room for things to change. So, but I will say that there's twins involved, and there's a cult involved, and I'll leave it at that. That may change, who knows? But right now that's what I've got. And I'm also working on the adaptation of Pretty Things. I'm writing as a TV show for Amazon.
Oh, great.
Nicole Kidman is producing it and taking a role in it. So I'm trying to turn a book into a TV series right now. So
which is quite an undertaking.
It is. So I've got a lot on my plate right now at the exact time when I have no childcare. So there you go.
Exactly.
Well, you just interjected what is the answer of my next question, which is any TV or film interest, especially with both of you being out in LA.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm doing Pretty Things, and then my last book, Watch Me Disappear, is also in the process of, I'm in development with that for a TV series too. So, it's LA. Things happen. Sometimes more often than not, they don't. But right now, things are looking really positive. So,
how about you?
With Tate Taylor, the director of The Help and The Girl on the Train, currently, yeah.
Wow, excellent. So this is a 3-part reading question. I'm happy to repeat it at any point. Who are some of your writing influences? Who are some of your favorite authors? And who have you read and loved recently? And they can be one and the same. It's just 3 different angles at who you like to read.
Well, recently I've read and loved Janelle Brown.
Me too.
Today. I'm a huge reader. I'm like a voracious reader. My husband always laughs because I'm constantly saying, finish that book I was reading. And he's like, oh, how many is this week? Anytime that I have time, I am reading. I love the classic authors like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, obviously. And I'm always like going back and rediscovering things of theirs or reading things like I finished today, The Garden of Eden, which is the last of Hemingway's books ever to be released. And I'd never read it before. And it was so incredibly modern reading it. It's this crazy feeling when you read something that was written a long time ago. I mean, like, you know, it takes place in the 1920s, like nearly 100 years ago. And yet these people and the things that they're dealing with are so very modern. And his style of writing is also so very modern. I love him. As for thrillers, I love Ruth Ware, and you know, I've said this a million times, but like I can always I can just get through her books just like that. You know, I definitely think that like the Crazy Rich Asians, Kevin Kwan's book was, you know, with some of the like over the top details in The Lion's Den, that was definitely influential there. But yeah, I have so many authors that I read. I'm constantly reading. It's very difficult to choose one.
Yeah. Do you read within the genre while you're writing? So you don't have a problem with
yes and no. I read, I have to rotate genres. Like, you know, I don't generally read like thrillers back to back. Like I'll read a thriller and then I'll read a classic something and then I'll read literature and then I'll read romance and then I'll, you know, it's like, and I'll read chick lit and then I'll read you know, so I like to read all over the map. And I also like to see what people are doing. And I find inspiration in that, of course, you know.
How about you, Janelle?
I would say that, you know, in terms of the genre, and I hate using that term because I feel like so much stuff crosses different genres now that it's the kind of stuff that I like. You know, my favorite authors, the ones that I go back to a lot are Tana French, Sarah Waters, Megan Abbott, Gillian Flynn, obviously, and Laura Lippman. These are like writers that I think transcend genre a lot, and that's really like what I aspire to do as a writer. I love, and you know, outside of genre, I mean, I read everything, but big influences for me are like Ann Patchett, Zadie Smith, Jennifer Egan have been some of my favorite authors. My first couple books were really influenced by Jonathan Franzen. I loved that kind of stuff. Lately, I mean, this year it's been a real up and down year for me. I think I've been reading very differently than I usually do. I was having a hard time gripping onto books for a long time at the beginning of the pandemic, and so there's a couple books that kind of jumped out, and finally I was like, oh, okay, these are books I can hook into. There's a book by an author named Ruthie Thorpe called The Knockout Queen, which I thought was fantastic. Kevin Wilson's book, Nothing to See Here, I loved that book. And also a book called A Beautiful Crime by Christopher Bolin, which is more of the genre book, but about a con artist in Italy, actually. So those are some books that I've really been hooking into lately. But yeah, I read everything. I read all genres. So Graham Greene, I mean,
yeah,
you go wrong with that. Oh yeah, Shirley Jackson. I'm reading a lot of Shirley Jackson. Love her. It's
funny you should say the Christopher Bolin book. John and I have a private chat for the questions, and he just put, yay, Bolin, because he has done a from home recommendation video for that. And he has been a huge fan of that book. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. I loved The Destroyers, which is his last book, and so I was a big fan of his book before it came out. Before this came out, and when it came out, I was like, "Yay, Christopher Nolan!" And I've since connected with him, and he's lovely. He's talked up my book. I've talked up his book. We need to do an event together because we both have like grifter con artists who are going after antiques in our books. So yeah, his great book, great writer.
Maybe we can see you both in person next year. If not, we'll do something joint event. Yeah. So we have a couple more questions. Actually, Alice asks, both authors have mother characters who pass on their bad behaviors to their daughters. Can you talk about your take on humanizing your villains and grounding your characters' bad behavior?
That's a good question. I can go first. Almost all of my books have complicated relationships between mothers and daughters, and I feel like, in this book, the villainous characters are related, and I feel like even my villains I fell in love with. I don't like writing villains that are just one dimensional. I want them to be. I want you to understand their behavior. It's not just here's a villain and they are a bad person, they're doing this bad thing, but why are they doing this bad thing? What has turned them to this life of crime? What has caused them to betray their daughter, betray their husband, betray, whoever they're betraying? Because it's not interesting to me if I don't know that about them. I mean, I feel like I like to study character. And that's what that most interests me about writing is kind of getting to know these people and understanding what makes them tick, because otherwise it's just actions on paper. So getting into my bad guys, it's really about just spending time with them and asking the question, why are they doing this? What in their character, what in their past has pushed them to this direction that they're going to do these things?
I completely agree. I think it's so important that all of my characters are three-dimensional, and that includes the bad characters, because nobody is fully bad or fully good. We all fall on a spectrum somewhere in between. And I think that, one of the things that influences us the most in our lives is our upbringing, right? So it makes absolute sense that you would have a mother passing down bad qualities to her child, and whether it's that she's passing down an exact bad quality as in they're replicas of one another, or whether it's that the way that she treats her child makes her then act in a certain way. I think that's one of the places that you look to when you're trying to figure out, who is this character and what made them the way that they are. Oftentimes upbringing is a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you both have succeeded very well, though, in having characters who do bad things, but you understand their motivations. And that leads to my favorite motive question. I normally have a P.D. James quote in front of me, and I failed to have it tonight, but she says that basically there's a limited number of motives out there. It's so what is your favorite, your go-to motive to write about? For clearly for doing bad things.
I think that for money and power are two of the big things that people do bad things for. Now, in the Lion's Den, I'm mainly dealing with money. Mm-hmm. And the people who are doing the bad things in this book are mainly doing the bad things for money, because that's the theme of the book. And like we discussed before, that doesn't mean that all people who have money do bad things, but these people, the reason that they're doing the bad things is for money. My next book deals with fame in that same way. So you see, and oftentimes fame and money do go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, it's all power, right? Money is power, fame is power. If you have a religious element, religion can be power. So I think that, we're all doing the things that we're doing in our lives in order to feel good and in order to feel okay about ourselves. And some people mistakenly believe that, what will make them feel good is to feel better than other people. And the way that they do that is through power.
John has provided me with P.D. James 4 L's that I didn't have. love, lust, lucre, and loathing are her 4.
I like that.
So clearly this one's lucre. How about you, Janelle? Do you have a favorite of those?
It's funny because I was going to say security was going to be the word that I was looking for, because which I think maybe in a way captures all of those, because I feel like all of my characters and the ones who are doing bad things or good things do them because they're looking for some sense of place in the world, some sense of security in the world, some sense of security in themselves. And insecurity is what drives and motivates a lot of the behavior. And I feel like if you look at money, if you look at hatred and jealousy, for me, those 4 L's make sense, but the psychological motivation before those 4 L's is the question of security or insecurity in the world, that makes you feel like you need money, that makes you feel like you need to be, take someone out that you don't like, that makes you feel like you need love, that makes you feel like, what's the fourth?
It's love, lust, lucre, and loathing.
Lust, sex, that's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're all tied. I don't know. I've written, a lot of my books have money in them, that's for sure. And a lot of them have love in them too.
Well, those are things that keep the pages turning, right? Everybody loves a good love story.
There's sex, there's love,
Someone the other day answered that her prime she frequently uses is the discovery or keeping secrets hidden, which is not covered in that list. Right. But is such a big thing in psychological suspense and such a so prevalent as a plot device right now is doing bad things to protect yourself from your secrets or bad deeds being known. So,
or maybe even a mistake that you've made. You see that?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's very much in my books as well. I'm very much a secret. Everyone keeping secrets from each other. This book is all about secrets. And also seeing selective vision, where you see what you want to see and choose not to see what's inconvenient for the narrative that you're telling about your world.
So I'm going to move on to my favorite part of anytime I interview authors. I always do this. But while I start on this portion, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I will try to get to them. But I'm going to start my Proust questionnaire questions. So just very quickly, so we have a chance to get to know you, in addition to having known about your writing and your books. I always ask just a few questions from the Proust questionnaire, none of them that are terribly dark or very, very difficult to answer. And for those of you who don't know what the Proust questionnaire is, Marcel Proust came up with a set of questions in the late 1800s to ask people at cocktail parties and gatherings to kind of get a sense of who that person really was. So on these, let's just, for ease, we'll start with, we can alternate so that no one's put on the spot first every time. So Katherine, you can go first on this one. What is your most prized possession? And I always qualify this by saying it's something inanimate, not your family or your dog or whatever.
Probably my wedding ring, my engagement ring. It was my grandmother's, and I was very, very close with my grandmother, and she gave it to me. She met my husband before she passed away, luckily, and she wanted us to use it when we got married. So that's probably my most prized inanimate possession.
How about you, Janelle?
That's a hard one. I have a beautiful dining room table that was a mid-century modern dining room table that I also inherited from my grandmother. That is just beautiful and I love it. So
excellent. So Janelle, you'll do this one first. What is your current state of mind?
Frazzled.
All right, Katherine.
Janelle, I'm afraid you stole my word. Because I definitely feel that same way, but I will also, I'm just going to add on to that. I'm going to go with hopeful, because that's how I want to feel right now. I want to feel hopeful. So I'm going to go with that.
Right. I think that I would still frazzled also right now, to be honest. I think there are a lot of us who are just barely hanging on. So frazzled is Traveled is good.
Change though.
Hope, exactly. All right, Katherine, you're up first this time. What is the trait you most admire in a person?
Generosity, and I don't just mean of money, I mean of spirit.
Great.
I'm going to say creativity. I really, really admire creativity.
And on that note, Janelle, if not writing, which talent would you most like to have?
I'd love to be musical. I'm a terrible singer. I wish I could sing really beautifully. That would be nice.
Katherine?
I wish I could fly planes.
Wow. So many people say music. Not that that's a bad answer. Like so many people want to sing or play piano, or it's almost always musical talent. It's so funny. But fly planes, that's fantastic. That's a different answer. And it must be
doable. You can do that.
Yeah.
Right. Not right now, but no. Maybe someday when I have time and things are different.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, before we wrap this up with my final question, I'd just like to take a moment to thank you both for joining us this evening. We do have, again, we have copies of both books in stock. I cannot recommend them highly enough. I love them both. We have signed book plates for Lion's Den. And
book plates in as well if you want them.
We would love to get that arranged. We'll be in touch tomorrow about that. We're still closed at Murder by the Book. We are doing mail orders and contactless curbside pickup until things look a little better in Houston. That's going to be what we're doing, and we'd love to hear from you. Tomorrow night, we will have Susan Wiggs in an interview with John, and I think we have something like 40 authors over the next 3 weeks. So make sure to check your calendars and tune in if you're enjoying these. And to end this conversation, I will close with my favorite Proust questionnaire question. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Who is it first this time?
You're first this time.
I'm on a beach with my family in the shade, reading a good book, sipping a good glass of wine.
You took mine. That's not fair.
No, we should be friends.
I was gonna add, like, I actually had the vision of the floaty in the water, and I'm in it with the book, and my family is swimming nearby while I read.
But not bothering.
Quietly.
Every once in a while doing something very cute and saying, "Mom, look." I'm like, "Oh, you're so cute, but you're letting me read my book and in peace."
And that vision, Katherine's the only one who has to deal with sand. So I'm voting for yours, Janelle. Anyway, thank you both again so much. Both books are available at murderbooks.com. And everyone have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.